meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Forgotten Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Cabe, and I am so happy to be with you. If you are part of the foster care community, passionate about serving, or simply interested in learning more, we are here for you. In every episode of this podcast, you will hear stories from men and women who have experienced foster care to one degree or another. They may have grown up in the system, are caseworkers, foster parents, or others who are here to bring you hope or encouragement. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and share it with a friend. And remember, you are not alone. I hope you enjoy the Forgotten Podcast. Well, the LGBTQIA plus conversation has intersected with foster care in recent years quite a bit. And with it brings questions we get to talk through today. And I'm really thankful for this opportunity. Some of these questions are, how can we care for our LGBT kids as foster parents who love Jesus and hold to a traditional view of marriage? How should the church come alongside LGBT foster parents who do not hold to the traditional view, and others? So we're going to talk through some of these sorts of things. And Laurie, I'm so thankful to have the opportunity to have this conversation with you, this conversation that we're going to have through the lens of the gospel. But before we jump right in, I want our listeners to get some context about who you are. So you are the president of Impossible Ministries, which I love that name, by the way. Impossible Ministries, which is a teaching, podcasting, and coaching ministry with the mission to equip the church with a gospel-centered approach to marriage and sexuality. You also serve on the board of directors for the Center for Faith, Sexuality, and Gender. And you're in process right now of earning a master's degree at Wheaton.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So you're going all for it. Are you tired?
I'm so tired.
I understand. Well, you are also married to your husband, Matt, who is a licensed therapist. Wait, are you a licensed therapist or is Matt a licensed therapist?
Matt is. Yeah.
You're married to Matt, who is a licensed therapist, and together you're the authors of An Impossible Marriage. And you live in West Michigan with your 3 children.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, again, it's truly thank you, Laurie, for being on with me today. I'm grateful. And I'm thankful that your willingness to share your own personal story. And really, I'm wondering if, I'm guessing, I guess, that this is what drives your passion for the work that you do today. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah, for sure. Just a lack of resources in my own life just led to ministry to try and create resources for others because I know there's still so few.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and let's just get started with that. Will you share with us your story?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just hopefully do the abbreviated version that I can do. So I was born with, this is not my invention of a phrase, but this God-shaped hole in my heart that we all have. But instead of just being like, oh, you have this God-shaped hole in your heart, what do you need in it? Jesus is the answer for everything. We like to talk about how we have good needs that God put inside that hole in our heart for things like to be seen and known and loved and belong. And ideally, pre-fall, we get those needs met in perfect relationship to God and others. But darn it, we were all born after the fall. And so because of that, we all have a natural predisposition or default or orientation, if you will, to get the good needs of our heart met in ways that don't satisfy and don't glorify God. We're all born that way. And so I had some church acceptable ways of trying to get those good needs met outside of God. And that would be like people pleasing, performing, those ones get a lot of thumbs up in the church, which there's still idolatry, right? But then I also, from a very young age, I felt this draw toward other girls. It's hard to say the word attraction when you're 5 because it's just, that's not what you see, but I felt that draw. But I was growing up in evangelical 80s and 90s moral majority America, and the language around sexuality, they called it homosexuality. That was the word. It wasn't LGBT or anything.
Right.
What I heard was there is some sort of war on marriage, and the gay homosexual agenda is going to come. The way I interpret it was like they're going to come and murder babies in their cribs or something. Like it felt very dramatic. So I wasn't like, oh man, I'm going to surrender my version of broken sexuality to the lordship of Christ like everyone else is called to do. I was like, I got to shut this mess down. So I did that pretty successfully until college at Christian University. I loved Jesus as much as I knew how. And I met another girl, another Christian, who felt the same way about me as I did about her. And it was pretty confusing because the only narratives that I heard, this is now early 2000s, around LGBT sexuality, homosexuality, was you're not a Christian, and then you're like sleeping around if you're gay or homosexual, and you're sleeping around and like doing drugs, and then you come to know Jesus, and then you're somehow magically straight. And I was like, I already like know Jesus like a lot. I'm super like, how do I become more Christian to become straight? And that was really what I felt like I had to be, was straight in order to be in the church. And so I really reached a crossroads in my life where I like, because I believed what the Bible said to be true. I just didn't think I could live it out without wanting to die. Like it was such a war inside. Wow. And LGBT youth are 2 to 4 times more likely to have suicidal ideation, to self-harm. Trans people are 41% more likely. 41% of trans people attempt suicide. That's bananas. And I think Christians can often like, oh, well, they're sinners. And I'm like, gosh, you guys, what did Jesus do with sinners? What did he do with the woman caught in adultery? He saved her life first. He didn't say, go and once you stop sinning, I'll help you. When we were dead in our transgressions, Christ died for us. So we as Christians need to care about these statistics, because dead people can't hear the gospel. And then not just so that we get another tally on our like gospel belt, but it's God loves these image bearers, which includes you and me. So that was not what I heard. And I really felt like I needed to kill myself or come out as a lesbian atheist. And God in his mercy.
I got to pause you there, Laurie, real quick, because those were your 2 options. Die at my own hand, kill myself, or lesbian atheist. Those are extreme, and that's what you felt, and that's what you heard.
And I grew up in the church. That was the narrative, because I thought to be in the church I had to be straight, and I didn't know how to be straight, so I should die. That's the only way to cope.
So sorry.
Thanks.
I can't imagine the inner turmoil. Like you said, there was such a war going on. It was brutal. And I was like pretty spiritually and emotionally mature, but it brought me to there. So, in God's mercy, he had a woman come alongside me. Technically, she was my counselor because I was suicidal. And my friends were like, you should probably not want to be suicidal. So you should probably see a therapist for that. So I went to her for counseling about suicidality, but she came alongside me without flinching, without any sort of, gosh, I'm so scared of this conversation. And she neither was afraid, nor was she a Bible basher as far as, well, you know what's wrong. Leviticus 18, Romans 1, 1 Corinthians 6. It was none of that. She didn't open any of that. But what she did was she helped me to learn how to feel the needs underneath my desires. Those needs I talked about at the beginning, to be seen and known and loved. What I was running toward, what we all run toward, whether it's money, sex, power, whatever, it's all to try and satiate that gaping hole in our heart, right? And whether or not you're born that way, that of course, sure, maybe I was born with all these natural predispositions because I was born after the fall. And so here I am feeling these desires, but just because I feel them, but will they actually satiate? And
That's the annoying thing about idolatry, right? It scratches the itch, but like a bug bite.
Yeah.
So there, she came alongside me and helped me to get to the deeper needs and help me to remove the barriers between those deeper needs and the need meter of my soul. I had a lot of junk there. Because like I knew God, but I didn't experience his love, even in this place of pain and shame, especially. So yeah, there was some confession of sin to do, but that wasn't all of it. I also needed to grieve how mean the church was to people like me. I also needed to forgive people who had hurt me in my childhood. There's a lot of barriers, wounds between my good needs and the need meter of my soul. And when I started to remove those with this person who discipled me, I discovered the love of God. And Ephesians 3 says a lot about the love of God. So great. We'll never fully understand it, but then we will be filled to the fullness with the measure and the power of all the fullness of God. God's love empowers us to die to self. And not just die to my sexual desires, whether they were gay or straight. It's die to my people pleasing, my perfectionism, my performance, all the P's. And that changed me. That changed me.
I love that. I often pray, Lord, help like deeply ingrain this in my heart that anything that I feel like I quote deserve is not going to actually fill me. What fills me is when I draw closer to you and I do things that help other people see you. I mean, right? It's like when it's exactly what you're saying. The need beneath the desire is what we're trying to fill, and nothing will satisfy that need but Jesus.
No, that's right.
So where did you go from there? Like as you found some healing, and what do you do with that? How do you find even forgiveness?
I mean, forgiveness for the church, for those who'd hurt me, we're not made for sin. We're made for Eden. We're made for the new heavens and new earth. And so for me, it really took noticing that every sin done to me was like a dagger inside of me. And lament was so powerful. It's like we go through life and we get injured upon by our parents, by our friends, by whomever, right? Even if you have the best parents, they still hurt you. I've already hurt my kids. And the littlest one, the 3-year-old, he's already damaged because I'm imperfect.
Right.
But it's just a fact of parenting. So we go through life with these wounds, these sins done against us. And instead of really grieving them and taking out each one that's like a dagger and giving it to Jesus and like, Jesus, you died for this, we tend to throw a big moo-moo over it all. And then we bump up against each other at church about the color of church carpet. And then we're like raging about that when really we're mad about our childhood, blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah.
So that was a big process, was grieving, taking off the moo-moo and saying,
It's such a great visual though, because I'm picturing that with the knives, you know, and like it hurts, everything hurts, and it hurts deeper than it really, like, it's not the church carpet issue, right? It's not the issue usually you're raging about.
No, never, ever. Yeah. The issue's not the issue. And so that was a huge piece. And then where I went from there is as I fell in love with Jesus, which sounds so cheesy and cliche, but I have no other words to describe it because he really became, he became the one I was looking for. But I sensed his hand on my shoulder saying, I have someone for you. And I was like, you mean marriage? And I was like, hard pass. Like, I'm still attracted to girls. I'm willing to submit that to Jesus, but like, But the funny thing about God is like when he asks for your life, he asks for your whole life. And as you start to get in alignment with his will, he puts his desires in your heart. And it wasn't that he was making me straight. Like, that's not it. It was that he said to me, not everyone like me. This is not prescriptive for everyone else who's attracted to the same sex. But to me, he said, Laurie, the mode I want you to fulfill the mission to make disciples is as a married woman. He knows what will sanctify us best and bless us the best, right? And so some people are called to singleness, some people are called to marriage. And so God said that to me, and I wasn't dragging my heels. I was just like, all right, well, that's on you, because it stresses me out. And he had my heart fall in love with or connect to not all men. That would be very weird and sinful, quite frankly. But to one man, Matt, who I was already friends with. And so now there's a story involved in that. And you can read our marriage book where it almost all fell apart, an impossible marriage. But we, it'll be 14 years in February.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. That's awesome. Whew. Well, there's so much you said there already that I'm just like, it's just good stuff and good reminders and recenters us on what it's all about. I want, though, to dive into, you wrote this pastoral paper for the Center of Faith, Sexuality, and Gender called 10 Things I Wish Every Christian Leader Knew About Gay Teens in Their Church. Yep. And you were writing this really for the teen like you were, right?
Yeah.
So is that accurate? Yeah,
I was a little less aware than maybe teens now, but yes.
Sure. But as kind of a response to that, and I just love to go through these. Sure. I don't know if we'll get through every one of them, but let's just start with the first one. Is that I have no idea who I am, and just speak to our listeners, speak to the church, how we can best love our neighbors.
Yeah. So if you are someone listening and you maybe are fostering an LGBT youth, or you're thinking about it, or you've got kids and you're like, oh my goodness, what are they learning in their schools? The biggest thing to do is to combat anxiety at all costs. Anxiety just floods our prefrontal cortex with crazy amounts of hormones that don't help us think logically. And also, it's not the way of God. So I'm always trying to take this conversation and make it something that we can more easily digest so that we can just calm down. God is still sovereign. He's still in control. So these LGBT teens, they don't know who they are. I know. I talk to people all around the world all the time, and I understand that teenagers. My first grader came home yesterday and said 2 girls kissed each other at school. Now, I don't know if it was a romantic thing, but it's something. I know there's second graders dating in my second graders class who are the same gender. So I understand that there's a lot of people who seem to be choosing their letters rapidly. I get that. But before we dive into why is that, is this like a quick thing? Is this just a fad? Let's just remember what it was like for us growing up. And in the lunchroom, you had the jocks, you had the preps, you had the cheerleaders, we were always trying to categorize ourselves into these different groups. And so if we can remember that this is kind of like that. And are there more devastating consequences in some ways? Because if you start to transition and take hormones at 12, that's going to impact. Yes. But if we just take a breather back and say, these are a bunch of kids who are looking for Jesus and are looking for a place to belong. And this is a way they're doing that. That can help take down the anxiety a notch.
Yeah. And so often, right, doesn't anxiety turn into, at least I know for myself, it turns into control. It's fear. 100%. It's like, I've got to fix this and I've got to charge. And that's so hurtful, right?
Yep.
Like we come 100%. As attackers as opposed to walking with people, loving people.
Right. That's so good.
I've never been, when I'm as a parent, when I get into control mode, it just has never worked well. It just hasn't. And I have 6 teenagers at the moment, and they don't like to be controlled.
No, that doesn't fly well.
It doesn't. They just don't connect with that.
They don't. And that's not how God, even God who knows everything, he doesn't do that to us. That's not how he parents us.
That's right.
It's through control.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about number 2. I need a gospel-centered identity. I feel like you've kind of talked through some of this, but if there's anything to add, please do.
I mean, I feel like I've learned so much more even since writing that paper, since starting my master's program, just on what the gospel is. I guess what I would say to that. So my 6-year-old recently was like, "Ugh, why do I have to go to school?" And I wanted to say, so you can get a good job and get out of the house because I'm tired. And that's very, very culturally acceptable, right? Like, get a good job, get out, kid. I didn't say that, praise God. And I said, because her name's Juliet or Juju, because Juju, God has created you with awesome gifts. And when you go to school, teachers and your education, when you go to school, God's working through that to really hone your gifts, because the purpose of your life, Juju, the purpose of your life, kid, is to help, to partner with me, with dad, with your brothers, with your sisters, to push back the darkness and to usher in the light. That's the gospel narrative in 6-year-old words. Is there's this, it started good, got bad, Jesus came to redeem and restore, right? And so I want my daughter, it's so easy for me to ride even the church waves, cultural waves of like, so then you can get married and make Christian babies and tithe and die. No, that's not the purpose of your life.
Tithe and die.
So fun. Nor is it to just get a good job and just get out. Her purpose is to partner with the church to push back the darkness and usher in the light. So that I'm shocked that every time when I go and speak to high schoolers and junior hires, truly, verily, verily, I say unto thee, they have a hard time listening to sexuality conversations. Shocker, right? But when I start talking about why they were placed on earth, when I ask them, like, what's the purpose to your life? They got no clue. And they're a little panicked about it. So if we can start pushing there about what their purpose is, that it's not to get married and make Christian babies and tie the dye, nor is it to just get a good job and get out. It's to push back the darkness and usher in the light. That stirs something in them. That's bigger than who you're attracted to.
Yeah. Right. That's why we're here. Woo! Love it. You said number 3, I am a prodigal too.
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember how and why I said that. So if that's from the,
I can tell you right now, because I was such a good kid, people assume nothing painful or messy could be hiding behind my smiling face and shiny blonde hair. That's how you started it.
So when I talk to parents of LGBT kids, it depends on where they're at in their journey, but there's usually a big bucket of anxiety, and which stems from some good places. Like, I don't want my kid to go to hell. Some of it's, I would say, sinful places. I just really want grandkids. Now I'm seeing grandkids disappear. I also see a lot of shame. They're feeling really like, well, what did I do to fail? Now, maybe in a fostering situation, it's who failed this kid to make them this way. Just as an aside, discovering the origin story of what caused this is a waste of your time. Because the reason we're trying to figure that out is because we think we can go back and try and fix it. And I'm just, that's a waste of time. I spent too many years of my own life doing that. The reason it's a waste of time is because you're not likely going to be able to undo it. And if you try and do that, you're pushing your teenager to try and undo what is really a place of safety and genuinely how they're feeling right now. You're just going to cause more fights. So I would say, don't cause more fights. If maybe you'll talk about that in 5-10 years when they're following Jesus, who knows? I would instead focus on what is. And again, the whole recategorization thing, to kind of pivot what I said in that article to a little bit of more of my understanding now, is parents can be like, oh my gosh, my kid's LGBT. And it's such a panic mode. They're dealing with shame, dealing with that anxiety. And I'd say, you know what? They're sinners. They were sinners before now, and they're sinners now. And if you can, whatever level of following Jesus they're doing, if you can recategorize them into, you know what, they are prodigals in need of Jesus. They were before now. They were either the older son or the younger son, and they were after this. So this isn't new in the sense that all of a sudden they're a special category of sinner. They're just regular old sinners.
Yeah. How about I need room to be messy?
Yeah. So a lot of these originate from that anxiety control, like you talked about. And I think as parents, I have a lot more compassion, even again, since writing that, as my kids have gotten older, of just like, even yesterday, my daughter was like, Mom, you worry too much about us at school. So like, how was your day? She's like, you just want us to always have a good day. I do.
Yeah.
But usually when I was thinking about her mild rebuke of me, I was like, what's that stemming in, Laurie? And that's my own anxiety. And like, God, do I actually trust that you love and have my kids more than I do?
Yeah. Because
if that's the case, then when it comes specifically to LGBT stuff, if they are like, Mom, I think I like this girl, and we aren't gasping and clutching our pearls and like, well, can you tell me about that? What do you like about her? Because remember my story? Remember how the issue is never the issue?
Right.
There's something they see in that person, in that group, in that club, in that LGBT world, that yes, they feel in themselves. I'm not denying the sexual desire at all. I'm just saying, even if they fulfill that sexual desire, it's not going to scratch the itch of their heart. So let them be messy, and be messy with them in the conversation. Be willing to engage. What do you like about her? You're not affirming same-sex marriage. You're just being a normal person, and you're trying to gain relational equity, to talk heart to heart, to hear those good needs. Well, I like that she's always there for me. I feel really safe around her. Bing, bing, bing. She literally just self-diagnosed how and where she needs God. Safety and feeling seen and protected. Now, you're not going to just duct tape, well, God actually sees and is safe with you more than that. Like that, does that help me and you? Why do you go to your idols? God's better. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That's so logical.
Yeah. And I think I loved how you said too, you're not affirming anything. You're not affirming same-sex marriage by loving your kid and asking questions. Yeah. It's you're connecting to the heart so you can get to the deeper issues, and because you love your kid.
Yeah. We as parents, if your kid was dating a non-Christian opposite sex person, how would you engage? Probably like a normal person.
Yeah.
You'd have some concerns, but you'd ask questions. We need to learn how to practice hospitality and engage conversations so we can get to a heart level like we have in other conversations when it comes to sexuality. We've gotten better at pornography. We've gotten better at talking about sleeping together before marriage. Now, I'm not saying those are good things to do.
Right.
Just saying we can't gasp and clutch our pearls, because that's not going to actually get to the heart of the issue, because there's always a heart underneath the issue. Right.
And in deep need. Let's talk about let's say as a foster parent, you welcome someone in and they tell you, maybe you knew before, maybe you didn't, but they tell you that they identify as an LGBT teen in some way or another.
Mm-hmm.
And like we talked about at the very beginning, you go to a church that does not affirm same-sex marriage, all these things, and you want to make sure that your church is a safe place for them and that you are a safe place for them, and yet you also don't want to water down gospel or truth. What are some of your recommendations in that? And how do you even make sure and know that church is a safe place for them?
Gosh, that's massive, massive questions. So I'll take it one at a time.
Just a quick, just solve the problems of the world right now. Can you?
They're great questions, but we'll break it down. Just follow up with me after I do one part. Okay.
Great.
So first of all, when they tell you that, I'd really encourage you to say, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Can you help me understand what you mean when you identify as non-binary, gay, trans? Because that is, people mean different things in different ways. Like they can all be non-binary and they mean differently about it. So then that will help you understand.
Yep.
Also, my belief is you can identify as gay or trans or whatever, and you can still be following Jesus. Now pause. What I mean by that is you're putting language to your inner experience. And you're saying, this is what I experienced, but I'm surrendering that to Jesus. So don't assume something about their faith or even what they're doing with their sexuality when you ask the question. So first you're just asking,
that's good.
What do you mean by that? Okay, thank you. Hey, I'm curious, do you have any sort of faith? And I don't know how that happens with foster caring, what you know behind the scenes, whatever. But hey, I'm just curious, do you have any faith? And how does that interact with your sexuality or gender? Because gender is different than sexuality. Sexuality is who you're attracted to. Gender is how you feel inside your body about your masculinity, femininity. So I'm curious how those interact. Now, again, you can't go wrong. Like I said before we started recording, if you're genuinely curious and humble, your questions hopefully won't be viewed as hateful or spiteful. Now, if you are hateful and spiteful about this conversation, you got to go do some work with the Lord, because Jesus hung out with the least of these, with the drunkards, the sinners, the prostitutes, and he was not judgy or hateful or spiteful. And so if there's a bitterness in your heart, I wouldn't want to put you with an LGBT person, because you got to work on, why am I extra angry about this sin than another sin? So anyway, that's an aside for heart work.
Yeah,
so I'd start with
good.
Thank you, and then asking genuine questions. And then I don't know what house rules are, but whatever they are for the straight people in your house, make them the same for the gay people in your house. Hey, and maybe it's not in that conversation, because they're going to go jump on their phone and they're going to go tell everyone you're homophobic and you hate people and you love Jesus and you're going to murder them in their sleep. So at some point,
timing is important.
Timing, yes. You could say things like, hey, in your list of house rules. Now, this isn't like, hey, thank you so much, we're so glad you're here, whatever. Hey, at some point we're going to go through house rules. Blah, it's so boring, but you got to do it. Again, I'm not a foster parent, so I don't really know how this goes, but that's how I would do it. Try to make fun of myself. So I'd say, hey, a rule that we have is we don't let significant others sleep over at our house. So whether that's, if they're bisexual, if that's guy, girl, doesn't, this isn't about sexual orientation. Just make sure they understand it's not about sexual orientation. So we're not going to put extra burdens on people just because this is their version of sin struggle. The ground is either level at the foot of the cross or it's not. So make sure your rules, house rules, are the same across the board. And so you're not going to probably be able to police who they date, but you can talk about sleeping over situations. So that would be that piece. Okay, I'm going to pause now. Any thoughts, reflections, questions?
I mean, I think that I think that all makes sense. And I appreciate that if it's the same for whatever you do for straight kids, you do the same. I think that's super important. Let's move into how do we make sure the church, our church family, those we're interacting with, are safe people for these kids that we love and care for.
God, that's just so massive because every church is different. And it really starts with executive leadership. Is your executive leadership creating the safety net of grace and truth? Here's how we approach sexuality, gender, marriage. Do you even hear how tender my voice is getting? Because this has been such a brutalized area. All of us could tell our war stories from purity culture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? We all have them. Sexuality has been so screamed about and really wrecked inside and outside of the church that we need to go tender. And so I would say it starts with executive leadership, really engaging the LGBT conversation with tender grace and truth and modeling for the congregation how to engage this conversation. So that, I don't know how much control your listeners have over that, but if your leadership has not talked about this in tenderness and grace, centerforfaith.com is a great start. That's where I serve on the board. That's where the pastoral paper you're talking about.
Yes. Love
so that'd be
this
a great
organization,
start.
this ministry.
Yeah, Preston's amazing.
Yeah.
But then here's the biggest thing, because you can't control that, and y'all are listening or fostering now. You might have LGBT students now or kids in your house now. Is listen, be alert for people around you really doing the eye roll about culture. Can you believe that Disney movie? Oh my gosh, there's a gay character, blah, blah, blah. You guys, I hear you and I hear our exasperation, but that is not the heart of God. Grief. Grief is different than rolling our eyes. Grief is, man, we're missing the mark when it comes to God's beauty, his gospel picture that marriage is. That's hopeful and has grief rather than, oh my goodness, I'm going to boycott Disney.
Yeah.
Because the LGBT kids in your life, they're not like, oh, they only hate Disney. They are going to interpret, they hate me and gay people, and I'm the worst, and I'm the worst sinner. And then you're going to go and talk to them about loving Jesus. Like, help me understand how that's going to work. You're rolling your eyes at human beings. And then you're going to go and talk about they need to love Jesus and how you love them. It's so incongruent with the gospel that it's just driving me nuts the more I see it. So I would really, if that's any of us listening, repent because that is so scoffery and self-righteous, pharisaical. And then we need to get on our knees and we need to go to grief heart. Go to a heart of grief and advocacy that stems from love as opposed to eye rolling that leads to vengeance.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing you can do is listen to the conversations around you. And when you as a parent, foster parent, hear these conversations, hey, that's actually not how we talk about, I hear you. I got to be honest, like I'm really grieved about that. Call it out. Call it out in your friends because it's sinful. And that will help. That will build up your LGBT youth that's in your house.
Yeah, that's good. And I think even listening, asking the Lord, because we might think, oh, we don't do that. And maybe we do, and we don't realize it, So I think like just asking the Lord, where am I not being like you, Jesus? Where am I letting control or fear be what comes out of my mouth as opposed to your love, your truth, your gospel?
That's good. That's right on. And the Holy Spirit's so kind. He's not going to bash us over the face. He's
He
going to
is so
pinprick it.
kind. Yeah.
He'll just go, right here, dear one. And then we just confess and we're done.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I know. And that's what I love so much about the Lord is he does not shame us.
No way.
For our sin.
Mm-hmm.
He implores us. And it's exactly what he's saying. It grieves him because he knows you were made for so much more.
Yes,
I love you. I have beautiful plans for you. And so let us not, in his name, shame other people.
Yep.
It's not okay.
It's not okay.
And let's start with our own heart. Let's make sure that we are not doing this, even in subtle, especially in subtle ways.
Yes, especially.
Yeah. Whew. Well, Laurie, we're going to have to wrap up here, but is there any final words that you have on your heart for our listeners? Actually, let's just speak directly to anyone who's listening right now who does identify with the LGBTQ community in any way. We want to speak directly to our neighbors and our friends here who are facing this.
Yeah. Goodness. Guys, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for how the church has tried in our even idolatry of marriage in saying like that's the focus of our lives. We've tried to make you straight. We've tried to put men and women in boxes for gender boxes. And I believe there's two genders, but women are not Barbie and men are not John Wayne. So I'm sorry for how we've taken things that are cultural, evangelical world and made them gospel and that they've hurt you. And I'm sorry for the ways that we've gossiped and we have not seen sin as equally sinful and nailing Jesus to the cross, that he had to die equally for all of our sin. And I'm so sorry that we actually haven't believed that. And I'm sorry for the ways that we have made homosexuality this war. And that's just, it so grieves God's heart. And so I'm so sorry. And I would invite and ask you, like I invite and implore my LGBT friends who have surrendered their version of broken sexuality and gender to Jesus. We need your cultural lens to preach the gospel right now into this exact moment. We need you. I want to invite you to come and in your surrender, preach the gospel of how Jesus is worth it. He's worth giving up everything for because he's worthy and because he is actually the only need meter of our souls. So you can be such a beautiful testimony and witness to the church who has not traditionally done a super job at this. So we need you to be a light right now. And there is a harvest. There's a harvest if we are willing to set aside our fear, confess, and to lean in. Woo, the world is hungry. The world is hungry. And we need you.
Yes. Amen. Wow. And you are seen. Yeah. And you are so, so deeply loved by our Savior. Well, Laurie, thank you so very much for being here, for the work that you do. I'm humbled and appreciative of your time. So thank you.
Oh, I'm so grateful to be here.
Well, I hope that today's episode encouraged you wherever you are on your foster care journey. We want you to stay connected, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you will never miss an episode. Also, we have great content at theforgotteninitiative.org. Thank you for watching. I cannot wait to be with you next time.